Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week, and we especially welcome our new viewers via WMBD in Peoria. I'm Stu Ellis. I'll be taking care of the chores today, which includes a major focus on livestock and meat. We'll evaluate the White House initiative toward the meatpacking industry from the point of view of the cattleman and the small meat packer. You'll learn about a new crop insurance project that'll be really important for spring nitrogen application in growing corn. We'll check out a fascinating idea for crop sprayers and a lot more on Midwest Ag This Week, headed your way.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
At the outset of the week, the White House launched an initiative to investigate price fixing among the big four U.S. meat packers and create assistance for the small meat packers, with some mixed reaction to the latter. Owner Wes Heichel of Heichel's Packing in Decatur says companies like his have faced major challenges during the COVID period.
We faced the highest pork and poultry prices we had ever seen, coupled with a labor shortage. At that time, a lot of that business came back online, but with the labor shortage and high prices, there was no margin in the product, and we couldn't turn the product over quick enough to achieve sales volumes that we had historically done in the past.
Okay. The proposal that the White House has made, you've seen some of the details on those things that they're willing to provide to the small meat packer. What's your reaction to those?
Well, I think it could be positive. I think one of the things that's really lacking there is this idea that you're going to somehow train labor and bring labor into meat processing firms. I think that's going to be a much harder job than they think. We have been in a prolonged labor shortage for 18 months now. I don't see that changing. That's a focus area where I really think that more work is going to be required to figure out how you're going to do that. From my perspective right now, some of the workers that we get into Heichel's, we train them ourselves. They really don't have the necessary skills for us to achieve our operational objectives. So that small business is doing a lot of that training already. I think education system has some issues there that they need to adjust. I think some of the grant money could be great, the guaranteed loans, but I wonder how they're going to choose winners and losers on those loans. To me, the consolidation of the meatpacking industry happened probably more like the mid-'80s, late 80s, so this is nothing new. I think the companies like Heichel's that had survived that initial consolidation, I think we lost 7 out of 10 small meat processors in the 80s and 90s. Those companies that survived that and have proven themselves that can create margins, create jobs, have diversified enough. I think those existing plants that need updates in a capital-intensive environment should be where that money should go initially.
In addition to the assistance to the small meat packers, the Biden administration indicated plans to investigate price collusion among Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and National Beef. Cattlemen have complained they're only getting 20 cents out of the consumer dollar spent for beef. And with those four meat packers controlling 80% of the beef in the grocery store, cattlemen are not happy. Executive Director Josh St. Peters of the Illinois Beef Association says his members and their counterparts around the nation have seen tough times from low prices paid by those meat packers.
We have. The last 2 years have been a series of events that have upset the supply chain, and it's resulted in a lack of demand for cattle that's softened the price. We've seen it come back in recent weeks here to some degree, but still not near enough to get to the level of profitability that most of our producers need to recover from what they've experienced in the last 2 years.
The White House announced quite an initiative against some of the meat packers. What's your reading on that?
Well, you have to keep in mind that 85% of our supply chain as beef producers is controlled by 4 corporations today. And so the ability for the producer to understand all the factors that are influencing the demand for their cattle, price discovery as it occurs in the marketplace, and what the long-term impacts can be are critical to the investigations from the Department of Justice and what we heard from President Biden in his announcements this week.
All right. Do you think this will end up with something that's positive anyway? Is this going to resolve the problems?
We feel like, from an Illinois Beef Association perspective, that beef producers in Illinois need to have additional transparency. There needs to be some questions answered about the factors influencing demand for cattle, because at the grocer shelves, we've seen very high retail prices. Packers have made record profits. Meanwhile, the last 2 years, a lot of our producers have been, scraping by.
Those heifers were cleaning that feeder, licking that plate clean.
Yeah, they're going to need a little bit of some extra heat to make sure everything's flowing nice and keeping them warm and things like that. But Stu, it's actually not going to be that cold anymore the rest of our forecast, which is good.
Those girls are going to be happy at that.
Yeah. Friday definitely was a cold day, and we still do have some cool temperatures in our forecast, specifically for, we're thinking next Monday. But really, as we take a look at our future track with our temperatures, you notice that by next week, a lot of the really cold air just remains bottled up to the north, and so it's going to stay more in Canada. And also what'll be nice too is that temperatures across the Midwest are going to be a bit more stable. We're not going to see these giant increases and decreases with strong cold fronts as much. So it probably will be a little bit more leveled off by next week, which will be good. Our 8 to 14 day outlook, which does take us from January 14th later on into the 20s. You'll notice that on January 20th, that 8 to 14 day outlook is close to normal with the temperatures. Now for this weekend, we do have a system coming through that will bring us a chance for mainly some rain showers, but portions of Illinois will likely see a little bit of some light freezing rain, at least initially, with some sleet Saturday afternoon. But once we go into Sunday, at that point, we'll be looking at things to be kind of turning down in terms of the amount of rainfall, and maybe mixing in a little bit of some snowflakes here or there, and that'll be done by Sunday morning. So pretty much on the bookends of this system. In the beginning, Saturday afternoon, and the end, Sunday morning, there could be some mix, but otherwise, just looking at about 1/4 of an inch or so of rain out of that system. Then a few more flurries are possible for portions of the state by the time we get to Monday, but really high pressure will be in control here. Probably even a couple areas of high pressure come on through, just keeping things pretty quiet for us. And again, that's going to be important for those nice stable temperatures. It's not going to be as cold, we're thinking, with many spots in Illinois expected to be in the 40s next week. So our precipitation forecast around 1/4 to maybe 1/2 of an inch. Most of that does come with that system that moves through over the weekend. And our 8 to 14 day outlook with our precipitation is also closer to normal too. So Stu, after a extremely warm December and a pretty cold start to our January, looks like right now the middle of the month looks to be pretty average, which is good.
All right, so there's a lot of guys hauling corn to the elevator, this being January.
Yes.
What about roads under those icy conditions? Will there be much problem there for semi-trailer trucks?
Our chances of freezing rain on Saturday is very small, so really should not be too much of a concern. And then with a dry forecast, those roads should be pretty good.
Perfect. Crop insurance coming right up.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
If you typically split apply nitrogen to your corn, a new crop insurance program will provide an indemnity payment if you don't get it all applied as you want. Visit early with your crop insurance agent and ask about the PACE program, PACE, created by Illinois corn growers and conservation groups.
USDA has approved and agents have been trained on a new crop insurance program, reducing the weather risk of not getting nitrogen applied this spring, says Rodney Weinzierl of Illinois Corn.
Stu, we've been working with a number of partners here, a couple crop insurance companies, the National Corn Growers, of course, and a group of folks that are also very interested in crop insurance and the success of farmers, but also interested in conservation practices, and have been working together trying to figure out how do we capture the benefits of crop insurance, of conservation practices within the actuarials of how crop insurance is managed and implemented.
The program will not be available everywhere this year. It'll be in selected counties in Illinois and Iowa. And in the rush to get it approved for this year, Missouri corn growers were left out by USDA. If you're in an eligible county and had issues with fall applied nitrogen, meet with your crop insurance agent about this add-on to your crop revenue policy.
This product relates to the timing of nitrogen application that farmers would use with their corn programs that they have here in Illinois and kind of throughout the Midwest. And one of the things around nitrogen timing is always the risk of being able to get the nitrogen on in time for the plant to be able to utilize that nitrogen. Of course, we like feeding the plant with nitrogen instead of putting it all on prior to planting, because it's a more efficient use of the nitrogen. It's better for the environment, and it's better probably for yields and for just nitrogen utilization of the plant. But there's risk in that, so farmers are always leery, and it's actually the #1 issue of why farmers do not use nitrogen in season.
Well, it seems like farmers just submitted their Ag Census form for 2017, but it's time again to tell USDA what's produced in your operation. 2022 is the year of the next Ag Census. Illinois State Statistician Mark Schleusner says the mailing lists are being verified right now, and then forms will be sent out to you after harvest this next fall.
2022 is the reference year for the census. So near the end of this year, we'll be mailing out questionnaires to every farm we know of in the state of Illinois, and the same thing will be happening all across the country. Right now, we're trying to finalize our list and make sure we're including all types of farms, not just the corn and soybean farms we see so much of in Illinois, but specialty crop farms, maybe beekeepers or people with, let's say, exotic livestock like bison or emus. They can be farms as well. We use a lot of different lists for people who may or may not be farming. They may be part of a larger operation, and maybe they're just a minority shareholder, so they're not really the target operator, and we would screen them out. I spoke earlier today with someone who was a landlord, and they got one of our questionnaires in the mail. They weren't sure what to do, but they're not making the daily decisions for when to plant, when to till, when to breed the cattle. So this person was not a farm operator. We will screen them out.
So it's really everybody who sells a commercial agriculture product then?
That's right. The definition is $1,000 worth of sales. Now that is honestly a big garden. If you work really hard on a big garden, you could sell 1,000. Now if you eat all that at home, that's home consumption, that's not a farm. But maybe you're taking it to the farmer's market. Maybe you're contributing to a food hub or something like that. And if there's sales and if it's $1,000, then we would call that a farm.
Okay. Now the data is sometimes gets aggravating to farmers that they've got to pump all this in, but it's important that it gets reported.
It is. The census is used in many, many ways. When legislators are crafting the farm bill, they're going to know, well, how many farms will be impacted if we write the legislation like this? And the census provides farm counts. When we do our surveys, mostly we're measuring acres, we're measuring the number of livestock, but not how many farms there are. The census provides that farm count down to the county level and also by type of farm, like vegetable farms, fruit farms, etc.
I see Sherm Newland there. Hello, Sherm. How are you today?
I'm good, Stu. How are you doing?
Terrific, but I'll get better. Now, we've got a WASDE report coming up next week. Is that what was really putting the octane behind the markets this week?
Not so much the WASDE report. We know it's coming, so there's a little bit of caution on what that's going to say next week. But I think today was more about fund rebalancing and still a hot and dry forecast for the next 7 to 10 days in southern Brazil and Argentina, the way it looked.
They've had some tough times down there, and some numbers are starting to come out from some of the Argentine and Brazilian agencies about estimated yields, and they're going down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, right now, though, they are starting to harvest some beans in northern areas in Mato Grosso, and those yields are coming in pretty good on the high side. But, we've seen some private reports coming in, 10 to maybe even 12, 13, 14 million metric tons less for the Brazil bean crop. I don't expect them to say that next week. We do kind of expect, I think the trade's looking for maybe 3 to 4 million metric tons less right now. But for the USDA to make that big of a cut next week would be, we're not looking for that kind of a move. But for the week, though, I mean, it was a good week. I mean, we started out higher on Monday, kind of chopped around midweek, and then ended up sharply higher today. Like we said, it looked like the index funds were coming in from and starting to buy some commodities. Meal started higher. And then that led to soy complex up altogether and drug corn back up and wheat back up with it today. For the week, beans were up 71 cents. Corn is up about 13 and wheat was down just a little bit, but it maybe hopefully is put in a low and we'll start to work our way higher. But,
right.
Like we said, we do have the report next week. It's going to show, quarterly grain stocks, U.S. ending stocks, U.S. planted acres, South American stocks, global ending stocks. So there's a lot of numbers that'll be being thrown out. So, wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of surprise.
Sure.
Okay.
We appreciate that. Great information. Thank you very much. We'll be checking back with you. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back with you just in a moment. Protein is needed for good human nutrition, but in many countries there's a lot of difference in qualities, and that's not always identified on food labels. And that's something that's being reported on now in the College of ACEs at the University of Illinois. Here's Dr. Hannah Bailey.
So on the food label, we see grams of protein, and it's just a quantity. But what we really know what's important is the quality of the protein. So this isn't quite on the food label yet, but hopefully in years to come we'll see more, and you can see protein claims already starting to come on there if it's a good or an excellent source of protein.
Dr. Bailey used hogs for her lab test because they're closely linked to the human gastric system.
So we feed any kind of ingredient. For example, we fed burgers to pigs, and we can measure the digestibility by taking samples of the ileodigesta, so coming out of the end of the small intestine, and we analyze this for amino acids. And then we do some calculations based on quantity and digestibility to again get this value, and it's comparing the quantity and digestibility of amino acids in that ingredient with the requirements of amino acids for humans.
It's part of a project coordinated by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization.
Yeah, that's correct. We can use it in food agencies to make new policies, especially for developing countries that may not be getting enough protein. If they're commonly consuming cereal grains or beans and pulses, these have a low digestibility and therefore a low DIAS score. And so they might not be getting the quality of amino acids or the bioavailability that they need for growth. And so using these values, these policymakers can maybe adjust policies to include more animal proteins or even dairy proteins in with these cereal grains and pulses to kind of have a more balanced amino acid pattern that humans need. And so humans, we don't often eat just, a burger patty or corn. We eat this in a meal with, let's say, a bun or mashed potatoes. And so it's important to be able to know the quality of amino acids and the bioavailability that you're receiving from this meal. And that's important.
Will this translate to a change in swine rations?
Not necessarily to what they're being fed, but it could benefit producers in the sense that they're right now paid on the quantity of protein, and so if you adjust that for the quality, producers of livestock may be able to get more money for their meat that they're selling.
Stay with us for Shop Talk. At the Peoria Farm Show, there was a great device that's perfect for our Shop Talk session today. It's a boom extension for sprayers.
More and more, the most popular planter widths are a 24 row and a 16 row, so 60 feet and 40 feet. And so with our extensions that you can put on an existing sprayer, we can get them to that magic number of 120 feet. And it just, it gives them, they can spray more acres in a day. They can drive on planter tracks, which makes them more efficient because they're driving on already a firm, packed path. So their sprayer doesn't labor as much. it's easier to spray because they don't wander around in the fluffy dirt. And there's a lot of advantages. For a lot of the young guys, I hear that, well, because of your extension, I can make it to the t-ball game that before I wasn't able to do. So it makes for a better family life as well.
Dan, if you're putting on a longer boom, what happens if you hit a phone pole or something out at the edge of the field?
Well, we've developed a device that you're seeing right here, and it's our multi-directional breakaway. And in most sprayer boom applications, their breakaway only breaks back. So if you're traveling forward and encounter an obstacle, it will break back. We've noticed that a lot of people have had problems when they go to start spraying, they back into a corner, and a lot of times they're close to a fence. So we developed a breakaway that would go both directions. Our intent was to go forward and backward, but in testing the design after we had developed it, we found out it would go straight up as well.
Show me how that works.
Okay. So that's coming back, and then this one is going forward, which isn't the traditional way, and it'll go almost 90 degrees, and then it'll also go straight up. And the way that's accomplished is that these rod ends, or heim joints, some people call them, there's a ball in there that swivels, and so that's what lets it lift straight up.
Well, that concludes this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. We hope that you've benefited from some of the information you saw today and share it with your farming colleagues. I'm Stu Ellis. Join us again next week at this same time.